It's been quite a year.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah. I have like the face of a.
I mean, the Miseducation of Cameron Post, hugely successful.
Thanks.
And now the Bisexual coming out. Assuming, is it a coincidence that they've both kind of arrived at the same time?
It's just an accident. Basically, what happened was I made Appropriate Behavior, which is my first movie, and as soon as I made that and I started doing press around it, I knew I wanted to make The Bisexual. I wanted to make a dating comedy about a bisexual character. Every time I did press for Appropriate Behavior, it was my first time doing press, and I'd hear myself introduced as like bisexual filmmaker Desiree Akhavan, or like bisexual Iranian American Lena Dunham Desiree Akhavan, and it was humiliating. Like, it felt deeply, and I didn't know why. I was like, that's factually correct. I outed myself as bisexual, and yet when you say that, it feels like saying like international bedwetter Desiree Akhavan, like super duper embarrassing.
I'm so sure you're going to say my name after international bedwetter. I had it in my head you were going to do that. But that's a fair point though, because how you never hear heterosexual filmmaker.
No, but I mean, I understand it's the thing that sets me apart. I guess you'd hear like queer filmmaker because my story was about a bisexual character. But when I heard that, I was like, why does this make me so uncomfortable? It is factually correct, and yet it feels so humiliating. Shower peer, Desiree Akhavan, keep going. But so basically I wanted to chase that and figure out like, what's the bias that I'm holding against that label that I wear so unproudly. And that was the genesis of the show. And I wrote the pilot, and then I was doing press for Appropriate Behavior in the UK when my producing and writing partner got the rights for Cameron Post and said, let's start writing this. And I was unemployed at the time, and my girlfriend and I had just broken up, so I was homeless. So I stayed on her couch, and I didn't have a visa or anything. I was just crashing for a few months. And then it was her husband who said, you should pitch this TV show and see if they'll make it here, because it had been rejected by all the networks in America already. What? And I was kind of just going to let it sit for a while. And after he said, why don't you pitch it? I thought, why not? And then I got a visa, and my life here grew over the course of 4 years.
So just to clarify, you were technically homeless.
Yes, homeless. Crashing
on a sofa.
Yeah.
Writing a film.
Yeah.
Writing a sitcom.
Yeah.
And is that something you would recommend to any aspiring filmmaker and or writer? Is that the way to find the mode?
I think I was the epitome of sliding into failure. Like, I had this feature premiere at Sundance, and it critically did pretty well, and yet, I mean, and I didn't know this before I made movies, no one makes money off movies. Like, literally nobody. I think it is just a very elegant hobby at a certain level. It's a full-time hobby that no one monetizes, and I needed a job really badly, and I pitched Cameron Post in LA. Like, I took a trip out there, and I pitched, pay me to write this with my producer, and everyone passed. And so we just wrote it, ourselves. And I took odd jobs here and there to make ends meet, but also lived on her couch. So the ends were not that high to meet. And I think the advice I would give any filmmaker is to create your own opportunities. And I had some opportunities to make things after Appropriate Behavior, but they didn't feel worth making to me. And I wanted to build a career on my own terms. And it felt like I had hustled for 10 years to make my first feature. Why would I take an easy job right now? Why would I change my course?
So you were dead set. You were dead set. Like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it
my way,
your way, on your own terms. And that's quite a commitment.
Yes.
To make.
Of poverty and mediocrity. Yeah.
Mediocrity.
It was years of, living in a warehouse in Hackney Wick with like 8 roommates with no windows.
Oh. So that's the trick.
That's the trick.
You never know what time of day it is.
To be a 33-year-old adult living like a cat, like a homeless cat who's just,
right. So anyone who wants to write, that's the kind of mood they got to get themselves in, a windowless space and feel like a cat.
Or have family money. I mean,
right.
family money is another. It is the the marker of a successful filmmaker, usually family money.
And so you say you pitched the Bisexual to American networks.
Yeah.
You turn them, down completely to a person. Turn them down.
But they turned me down.
They turned you. Sorry. I'll get that right. So the American networks that you pitched to said, what was their response?
I think every network was like, that's really interesting. How would it appeal to a mainstream audience? And everyone wanted to know, what was the mainstream in? And to me, it was like, well, it's good storytelling and it's funny. But for them, that wasn't quite enough of a sell. It was like, what shows does it look like? I think in America, because also it's business, there's a wider marketplace to appeal to. So the idea was like, how does it remind me of Friends? And it was like, well, it shouldn't, because it's not Friends. And I love Friends, but I wanted to make something I hadn't seen before. And I think that's really difficult. But when I met with Channel 4, they said, great. How does it not look like anything else? Like, what's your story? What makes you different from anyone else we've worked with? And that was an exciting conversation to have.
I mean, when someone you're speaking to says, okay, well, that's not what we want it to look different. Yeah. What does that do to you inside? What kind of...
God, it's such a relief. Because then it's just like, you can be yourself. I think one thing that was interesting when I was taking those meetings years ago, I walked in wondering like, well, who do I have to be right now? And what card do I have to play? There is a straight white male protagonist character. It's kind of a two-hander, a love story, a friendship between my character, this bisexual woman, and her Irish roommate, played by Brian Gleason. And they're great for each other. She's his view into women and understanding them, and he's her view into men and understanding men. And it's sort of in the way of When Harry Met Sally, except they don't fall in love. It is a story about a man and a woman who amazingly remain friends and don't have sex with each other. Who knew?
Surely it's not possible.
Surely, we're so different.
We're in the realms of fantasy here, Desiree.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's funny, I think that as a bisexual person, you get to really see the differences between men and women in a way that other people don't, because other people haven't been in romantic relationships and been that intimate with both men and women. And the truth is, they're not that different. Like, that's the major shocker of this lifestyle, is that actually the sex isn't that different. Actually, the genders aren't so different. Actually, everyone's pretty similar. If you put power in someone's hands, they tend to become a jerk. And that's how we're in our current situation.
So it doesn't matter what their orientation is, what their predispositions are.
It's just power.
They just become...
Just spoils you.
Terrible people.
Yeah. That's why men are awful. No, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's very much about gender and I think it's something anyone can relate to is this, the life you have versus the life you want, and allowing yourself to be honest about desire and sexual fulfillment. And I think that's something that a lot of women are afraid to articulate, their desire. And it's something you don't see on screen very often either.
I mean, do you think this is something that would have been seen on screen that long ago? Do you think there's a mood now for...
I don't know. I don't know. I think right now people are more open to stories by women about women, but there's also a lot of discomfort with it, because I think desire is on par with power. And that to have the audacity to claim space for yourself and to take what you want, or to not take it, sorry, we're talking about desire here, no rape, but consensually take what you want, is a bit taboo for women. I think it makes you a bit brassy, a bit, what's the word?
Bossy?
Bossy. I don't know. I think I've never fit neatly into what it was to be a good woman.
But what is a good woman?
I think it's different in each culture. I think there's a certain kind of good woman in the Iranian culture, which is where I'm from. There's a good woman in the British culture, she's very quiet. I think I never fit that well, so I don't have problems discussing it. And I think those who fit it quite nicely are the ones who are trapped the most. Yeah.
Because there is a frankness to this piece, which is, unusual. I mean, do you think how do you think British audiences will react? I mean, you know, you've studied here, right? You're at QMU, so you're fully aware of our repressions.
Yes, I know. I've tried to seduce it out of many a British person and failed miserably. I think that one thing I love about this country is people's sense of humor. And I actually think that when it comes to entertainment and when it comes to their comedy, there's a frankness and an openness and an authenticity that I don't see elsewhere. And that has a lot to do with English comedy. And I'm excited to see how this lands here, because I do think my sensibility when it comes to comedy fits nicely, or that's at least how I've been getting by the past 4 years.
Well, you're very dry.
Yes, I am.
And Layla is very dry, which fits in beautifully with understatement and sort of pointed understatement as well. Yeah. So, but with regards to Layla, who is she to you in terms of where you are now in your life? Because it feels like in some of the episodes you are kind of talking about yourself. There are parts of your life that you introduce into that. I mean, are you Layla now, how you were a few years ago? The Layla you yet to come?
Yet to come. I hope not. So Layla's the name of the character that I play, and I think that with each of the characters, so I co-wrote this with my writing partner, and she produced Cameron Post and co-wrote it with me as well, and my first film. And we base every character on someone we know, and then take it somewhere else. And with Layla, it was about articulating my own insecurities about sex and the taboos of being neither gay nor straight, and finding the right dramatic situations to exemplify that. So I think that a lot of my worst fears about bisexuality were soaked into this, for sure. And that's where all that discussion about Layla's dissatisfaction with her relationship and her fear of coming out came from, were my own fears. I think, I mean, she articulates, you know, if a guy had seduced her when she was young and not the woman who she fell in love with as a teenager, if it had been a man first, she fears she would have gone the path of least resistance to not have put her family through that coming out process. And there were definitely moments in my own life where I wondered, could I have chosen an easier path for my family?
So, I mean, there's going to be some reaction to when maybe your family members see this.
Oh, when family members see this? I do not think about that, clearly. Clearly, I'm like, wait, when a family...
I mean, other people see this?
I know, exactly. I don't think about other people watching when I make something. It's funny, because I have to find music this week to replace another song in a sex scene, and the music supervisor had linked up a video of the music to the sex scene, and I'm in the sex scene, and I was like, I can't watch this. Like, it started to load, and it was buffering. It couldn't load all the way, and I was naked on screen, and I was like, oh God, for the love of God, why am I approving this? And then it hit me. I was like, oh, this is going to be on telly. I'm an idiot. I am an idiot. I think what I do as a maker is I like blindly chase my taste. And I'm blindly chasing where the story goes. And if it's better for the scene for the character to be naked and to be having sex and for us to be in a wide frame, of course I'm going to do that, because my ego is so freaking huge that it has to be the best shot. It has to be the best performance. And like, I do an entire scene with no shirt on because to me that was funnier and more honest. And then when I was color grading yesterday, I was like, on a personal level, this is uncomfortable. On a personal level, that upsets me. But my ego as a person who makes things is so much larger than my demands as a human being who would like to be comfortable, that one trumps the other.
But you'll still get that pang of...
Oh, it's so uncomfortable. I do not enjoy watching the sex scenes or the nudity that I myself am in. But it was what was required of the role. And so, if I'm making other actors do it, I got to suck it up.
And what do you what do you think? Having spent so much time in London, what do you think London's LGBTQ scene is like in comparison with maybe New York? And sort of attitudes towards bisexuality? Is London...
I have no idea in terms of attitudes. They seem pretty similar. Like, young queer folk are the same all over. Like, super ambitious and cool and paving their own path and making a world where there isn't one. And that's something that you see all around the world, where you're like, oh, you're really building it for yourself. You are making up the rules as you go and making the spaces and clearing your own track. In terms of biases against bisexuals, I don't quite know. I think my biggest biases are against myself and self-imposed. You can't change the fact that there's something really sacred about women-only spaces and something really sacred about a community of women to whom men are irrelevant, that they don't need them for romance or for life, and that the men in their lives, they choose them in their lives, but they're not, nothing about that space is contingent on male desire. That's very sacred and very rare. And when you're a bisexual woman, you bring another element to that circle, and I hate myself for it.
Really?
Yeah, and I don't think anyone looks at me and thinks down on me for it. It's a discomfort and it's a difference, and I just wish I belonged to that other. I think that was the discomfort, is I wished I'd belonged to that other group of just needing women and not needing men. And I don't need men, but just having that desire in me is an outlier.
Forgive the lazy trope. There is a lazy trope that says, well, bisexual, you get to pick whoever you like.
Do you feel like you pick your partner? I mean, I just feel like we fall in love with who we fall in love with. You've
got two pools to choose from, if you like.
Is it a different pool, though? And you fall in love with that person. Like, there's something so spectacular about seeing a connection with another human being. And it's so rare. And even when you're bisexual, maybe even more so because you're so strange, that, like, it's just so rare that you find a person that you connect to, that you feel like you can share yourself with. And just because gender isn't part of my decision-making factor doesn't mean that it's not a really extraordinary thing when it happens. It doesn't make it any easier.
I wasn't saying that's a thing. I was like, but there is people.
Yes, for sure.
Have that lazy misconception.
Of course, but it's not even just lazy. It's like a lack of knowledge. It's a lack of empathy. It's a lack of understanding that lifestyle. And I'm guilty of having a lack of knowledge, empathy, and lifestyle understanding for other kinds of ways of life. So because we just never hear about it, we never see it. I think it's really hard for someone who is attracted to the same sex only or the opposite sex only to wrap their brain around what it means to not have that as an outlier, to not have that be part of your type. You have other things that are part of your type, though. It's just not the male or female. Like, and I have a very specific type with men and a very specific type with women, it turns out.
Really?
Yes.
A bearded Irish novelist? Is that the
a bearded Irish novelist? You're saying from my well, he's not Layla's romantic counterpart.
Just saying. You write these things.
I have nothing against a bearded Irish novelist, though.
I mean, but because
I like him ginger. I'll say that much.
Say again.
Ginger. I like him ginger.
Do you?
Yeah.
What is it about
I don't know. I don't understand why it's such a weird thing here.
The autumnal face look.
I think in the States, it's a special thing to be ginger, and yet here there's a real, I've noticed a real discomfort, like a second-class citizen feeling about the gingers. Am I wrong?
No, you've like I say, you've been to university here, and you've lived here long enough to know that gingers do suffer their own sort of discrimination.
So sexy.
What do you like the oppressed?
I like the oppressed. Maybe I like the oppressed. I don't know. I think they're. I like them as a Middle Eastern woman. I don't understand why, but I really do have a thing for very white people, very white blonde women. I don't know why.
But the ones who kind of left out in the sun for too long.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I like a very lanky ginger man.
That's so specific. Yes. Lanky.
Lanky. I like them very lanky. It's don't understand. But that's the thing. It's like, who understands what they want and what speaks to them? Yeah.
So I was going to say, and so being in London, spending so much time in London, what a
of lanky
about to say, what
gingers.
a smorgasbord for you. But there's London itself in this is not tinkered with. It feels there is a real sense of London to this. It's a little bit scuzzy.
I really hope
it's not impressing people, and the night bus. It's terrible.
Thank you.
It's annoying. Like that. Not the scene's not annoying to watch, but you're like, yeah, I know that.
No, I have spent so much time on night buses, and it is to me the most beautiful melting pot, and the most beautiful representation of London life. To me, there is vomit on the ground, inching its way towards you. You can trail it all the way to a drunk girl whose head is just flopping back and forth and back and forth. There is a man Skyping in Turkish next to you. He's FaceTime Skyping with someone very loudly. There are children in the back doing God knows what, but making more noise than, you made during childbirth. Like, it is such a ridiculous party. And then someone's passed out completely and they're like almost inching their way to your lap. And you just keep having to lean them over, but like passive aggressively, like it's not happening. I think the night bus is an incredible experience that I would love to make a show that just takes place in the night bus.
Really? Like a comedy?
Yeah. Is it a drama in your world?
No, it's just they're magical because you get on and you sit down, and then when you open your eyes, you're either just about to get home or you've missed your stop. Like, that's
your experience. You're the type who can fall asleep.
It takes some effort.
Yeah.
Well, depending, of course, what the night out's
you're the sleeping one who I'm like trying to get off.
And the next day, you're like, why can't I move my head from here now? So I was just wondering, when you were here as a student here, studying at Queen Mary's, what was it? What did London say to you as a student? What kind of influence or impression did it make upon you?
I felt like people, fashion-wise, people go bonkers, which I very much appreciate. Coming from New York City, it is a black, far more conservative style. I do appreciate that, like glitter tutus. I wore a tutu as a skirt throughout college, thinking it was a very cool fashion statement. And when I got here, I was like, see, it's awesome. I do appreciate that people go out there. It's funny because people interpersonally, there's a decorum. But the way people dress themselves and behave once they've had like half a pint in them, completely out the window, which I think is very endearing. And I think there was a sense of humor and a level of acceptance I felt here that I didn't feel at home. When I came here, I met my first friend, who's my writing partner. Her name's Cecilia, and she is the reason I live here. We co-wrote Cameron Post. She produces all my work. We co-wrote the TV show. And she was the first person I met. And I felt in New York and growing up, and it's funny because New York's like the mecca for creatives, and you'd think that it was just such a perfect place to grow up. But I always felt like I was speaking one language and everyone was speaking another. And I was trying very hard to learn their language and dress the way they needed me to dress and look the way I was supposed to look. And then when I came here, I started hearing my language all around me. And I felt like I could suddenly calm down and just be myself a little bit. And that's a really rare thing. And I don't know why it happened for me in the UK at Queen Mary. But I was also taking a film course, and it was like my first year. I grew up writing plays and wanting to do theater and be a playwright. And then when I got to Queen Mary, I studied film, and it was like falling in love. Suddenly I learned about all these, because I grew up watching Short Circuit and really mainstream 80s films. But when I came here, I learned about, Agnes Varda and Catherine Breillat and like a bunch of snooty, awesome French filmmakers like Claire Denis. And so I got this education, and I really fell in love with the medium and felt like I had tools in cinema that I didn't have in theater to be able to tell the kind of stories I wanted to tell, which were comedies laced in tragedy.
I mean, it was quite a useful time then.
Yes, got a lot done.
And just finally, it's touched upon in the Bisexual. Just want to clarify. If you were proposed to in a toilet, is that? I mean, depending on the person, could it be a go? Could it be a go? Is a proposal in the toilet ever acceptable?
Yes, I think it's interesting. Actually, I think should a proposal be premeditated? I think is the real question here, and I don't know. I think if it were a fancy enough toilet, I will say the toilets in this building are so freaking nice that if you proposed to me in one of these toilets, I'd say yes.
Okay, now...
High ceilings, lots of light. It's a nice toilet.
Okay, now, just out of professional curiosity, I'll try that out off camera, see what you think. I'll make sure the taps have been buffed so they sparkle, so they really add to the glow. And then see how it goes.
The toilets in here are nicer than any home I've ever lived in. It is such a nice toilet. So yeah, I think the only mistake that Maxine Peake makes in the series is she chose a very shitty toilet to make the proposal in.
Would have been a very short series.
Yeah. She proposed to her in a nice toilet. Yeah. They got married at the end.